Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Chris. Good to see you.
Good to see you as always.
Thank
So
you.
tell
Thank
me,
you.
what do you want to throw out there for Holy Compost this
What am I,
morning?
what am I chewing on? What am
Yeah.
I chewing on? My mouth is so full, I can't figure out what the heck I'm chewing on. And that's not unusual, I guess, for me. So we tossed around the idea of life and what's the point of it and why we're here. And so then we thought, how about looking at both taking risks in life while taking care of oneself? And that seems like a very tricky, at least from my perspective, a tricky path, or almost like a tightrope. You know, because you're going to take the risk to go out in the tightrope because it's really where maybe the heart opens up in ways that it doesn't if we're really protective. And yet you don't want to fall off that tightrope and it all be over too, you know. So
Yeah.
So let's toss that around a little bit, maybe. What are your thoughts on that?
Taking risks. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think life is worthwhile without risks, and yet they are so unnerving, scary.
Yeah.
My question to myself when I take a risk is, what's the worst that could happen?
Mm.
And then if I decide that I can handle the worst that could happen, I go
Yeah.
ahead and jump in.
Yeah. Can you give a scenario, or is one coming to mind, or could we chew on that for a bit?
Yeah, let's chew on it. I can't remember the last risk I took, but I'm sure that I'm taking risks. I'm
All the
taking
time.
risks with communicating with my family. You know, are they going to receive this idea from me very well? And sometimes the answer is it'll just blow up. You know, this is a subject that we don't share. We don't believe the same things about the subject, so it's just going to blow up. And
Yeah.
then I ask myself, is there any value to me bringing it up? So and that's a kind of a threshing floor for because I tend to be a little bit provocative sometimes because I love a an interesting discussion.
You love Holy Compost.
Oh, Holy
Come
Compost.
on.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting.
I like being in the muck and have it be transformed. So,
Yeah.
what's your experience of that?
Yeah, so that's interesting because the compost, if nothing else, is real. You know, I mean, you can't say that that's not compost. I mean, when you see it, you say that's compost. It looks like it's a big bunch of oozing
Slime.
aliveness. Yeah, slime. Yeah, but it's alive.
But
It
and
seems
you can
alive.
tell it's there because it smells.
You can tell it's there because it smells. Nobody wants to go near it. So yeah, so it does sort of represent the things that we tend to avoid. And I think that's what you were talking about then. But yet if one avoids it, well then what? I mean,
You're nice and
what
safe,
is the
but
point?
yeah.
Be nice and safe, but gee willikers, yeah, I mean, I think I have similar things that I want to discuss with someone or talk about, and often I think I'll avoid it because of what you just said, like that this fear of it's gonna get worse. And also, I have about as much diplomacy as a bumblebee, if that's the word, if that's a good. I mean, I have none. I have something on my mind, and blah, I just put it out there, and often doesn't end up well. Yeah, but I keep doing it because it's like you, it's important to me to have my life be as real as it can be. And I think so the flip side of this was taking the risk and then taking care of oneself, which I think you touched on briefly. Like sometimes, this, I got to back off here because I'm starting to feel something that it's not comfortable. So I guess the question is, do we continue even when that's happening to push through if we can find ways in which we can keep the door open? Because often, like if I'm pushing something and I want an answer, or I want to have clarity, or I need to know I'm okay, that might be there in the midst of that, then it's risky because it can backfire, and I can end up feeling worse about something I've tried to clear up than I was going into it. So I guess my methodology is not the best. Let me just shoot from the hip here and see if they if they can take a bullet. I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure if there is a non-risky way to venture into these things.
Right.
We have to test the water, and sometimes I don't know, it's weird because sometimes you can venture a conversation with somebody that might be a little risky, and it doesn't go anywhere. But the reason it doesn't go anywhere is because they weren't feeling well, or they were distracted with a lot of responsibility, or and you don't necessarily know that because people, nobody teaches us how to communicate. That's one of the fundamental problems of our education, is that with all these reading and arithmetic, nobody ever taught us how to communicate. And communication is like one of the pillars of getting along in life.
It's like breathing.
Right, right.
It's just behind breathing. But I just thought of something interesting popped into my mind, which these things do sometimes when we're having these conversations. And I remember as a child, and still now it holds true, that the difference between my dad and my mom was the way they approached me. My father would tell me to do something, and my mother would ask me to do something. And it was such a big difference. I mean, I was ready to do what she asked, always, always. But my father, with his telling and his scolding. And so I'm just bringing that into this conversation because I'm wondering what I might be doing when I'm trying to, get some clarity on something and connect with somebody, is that I begin telling and not asking. And I think that shuts things down. And I have an awareness of it, not just at this moment, but I know that I can tend to be sermonizing. So I guess, if we want a sermon, we go to church, we don't need it in our conversations, but I think that I think I do that. And that is out of insecurity, not security. Because if I was secure, I wouldn't have to be telling. I could be asking. Could be wanting to gain wisdom or gain
I think it would be
understanding of
really
things.
nice to have some real life examples, because I
Yeah.
think sermonizing sometimes is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
You get somebody, if you're lucky enough to find somebody in their very, very authentic moment, that might be a form of a sermon. But anyway, if you could, can you, so one question I have for you is, when your mother would ask you, can you give an example of what something she might say?
Would you would you mind bringing your shoes upstairs? Because they've been on the stairs for a week now.
And your father?
Versus,
Oh.
take those damn shoes up them stairs, for Pete's sakes. I almost tripped on them again.
Uh-huh. So one is asking for cooperation, and one is scolding
And shaming.
and shaming. Yeah. And
of course, yep.
we don't
Yep,
probably come by those styles unless they were done to us.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And so,
but you said something just, yep, go ahead.
Well, your father got lucky and your mother didn't in that regard. No, your mother got lucky and your father didn't in that regard.
Right. And I don't know that my mother's upbringing was perfect, but I think they were a more cooperative family than my dad's family, which I think was shaming, blaming kinds of things. Yeah. You said something about being able to determine when one can be a certain way sermonizing with people, and I think that's the crux, to determine if somebody is ready for a sermon, quote. What determines that readiness? I think is probably differs from person to person, but sermonizing, if somebody's not ready, is not a good thing. I think it can actually, push away a person. So the crux of what I'm trying to say here is, how do we determine, how do we know for sure that somebody's ready for, we're using the word sermonizing, that might be another way of saying assistance, support, help. I mean, it can, a sermon can be all of those things. How do we know it? Because I mean, maybe sometimes somebody would actually say, can you tell me, what you think about my situation? And I guess that would be an open door to do that. If somebody's stuck in their place of unhappiness or whatever it might be, first got to get them unstuck.
So what are your tricks for getting them unstuck?
Really listening. I think really listening, and perhaps even sort of parroting back what they said. I'm hearing you say, this or that. And then if you're wrong, they could say, no, that's not what I said. Because sometimes we think we hear things that we didn't.
That's right.
Because we want them to be that, we want them to move out of their uncomfortability. And I think this is something we've talked at earlier Holy Compost about, our uncomfortableness with people's struggles, because we have our own. Yep.
One of the things I've found in conversations like this is, if I'm offended by something that someone says, I've learned over the years that often people just don't express themselves well, and what they're really getting at is their own failure or their own self-disappointment or something like that. So if I feel offended, I've learned to say to somebody, so your tone of voice sounds very either punitive or annoyed with me. Is that am I hearing you correctly? And very often they'll say, no, I'm not annoyed with you. I'm frustrated with myself. And it never occurred to me, because my frame of reference is me.
Right. Yep.
So I'm going to hear me. Yeah.
That's a plague, by the way. The me plague.
Yeah. Well,
it's rampant in our society.
We've got it in spades. Yeah.
We do. The other thing, though, that came up while you're just talking is that when we might be offended by something, I gotta remind, oh gosh, they're looking at the building, and they may knock on my door to come in and look at, just letting you know.
Okay.
I'm hoping not. So when a person's offended by something we said that was unintentional, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, I think. Because I don't think we intentionally hurt people. I don't think so. So what that could be is a couple of different things, I think. One is that we are ourselves struggling with the subject matter, whatever it might be, haven't got a clear not reference point, haven't got a clear sense of how we feel about a subject, what somebody might be going through. It might actually be alive in us to some degree. So it's being brought up by the discussion. We want to get out of our own uncomfortability by perhaps trying to redirect the other person's stuff. But how does anything ever change or ever come to light unless we do this, unless we have these tough conversations, we have these difficult conversations. In my family, and particularly my father's family, and we mentioned earlier, it was, you just put someone on the shelf. If you had an argument with Uncle Joe went on the shelf for the next 40 years. You just didn't deal with them. And I mean, that's a wound, it's a wound. And in my father's family, particularly, they had lots of wounds, and they pretended they didn't have any. They did that by working their butts off. Best workers you'd ever want to see. Because while they were working, they didn't have to feel. And this went on and on and on. And I can still feel it in myself. Still feel this reverberation of shame. So I think what we're talking about here, what you were talking about, is this exchange. And when it happens, when we have authentic connection, communication, all for both parties, the sermonizer and the congregation, so to speak. I mean, it's a back and forth. And I think.
So you broke up a little bit.
I think that's what.
You broke up a little bit.
Okay.
I wonder if you could, I was actually the most important part.
Okay, I'll try to reframe.
Yeah.
So I was just saying that when we have real conversations, we, I think the roles change, the roles from, person giving the sermon to I think that's because I'm getting messages. Am I breaking up again?
No, you're not breaking up.
So the point I think I'm trying to get across here, very stumbly, is even what we're doing here, Chris, I think is what we're talking about. We're bringing things up that are inside of us that sort of roll around and don't have and have little real clarity or comfortability or whatever we want to call it. And that's okay, because how on earth do we get there unless we do this? It is in this venue of sharing ourselves that we get guidance from one another. And I think that guidance, if we sit and hold love, is not just our guidance, it's something bigger than us. Right. It gives an opportunity for the divine to sort of move in there. Where two or more are gathered. I mean, they said that for a reason. That was said for a reason. So sermonizer or congregational, a person of the congregation, doesn't matter. The roles go back and forth and back, don't they, though?
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
It always surprises me where wisdom comes from. I think it's going to come from some professor from Yale. No, it's going to be some homeless guy on the corner who's going to tell me something and say something to me that is going to open my heart up. So,
or a drunk at a meeting.
Or a drunk, oh boy, they get the best stuff because they haven't got the cultural more that's saying, oh, you don't say that. You don't talk about that.
Right.
Well,
You
it's
actually,
alive to me. It's alive.
yeah, you actually go to a meeting so you can talk about that if you want to, or you can listen if you don't want to talk. That it's like being on a fast track class of self-revealing, the rewards of self-revealing authenticity, and how it not only, well, it mushrooms in our own heart when we are revealing our true experience and feelings, and it mushrooms in the hearts of everyone listening who's open, um in terms of, oh, that person did it, maybe I can do it.
Exactly. It gives people permission to be human because, in fact, our humanness has been smothered culturally. You're not supposed to, the old expression was, leave your dirty laundry at home.
Yeah, don't hang out your dirty laundry. That was something that I grew up with.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. And what was dirty laundry? Dirty laundry was our humanness, was our human struggle.
Yes.
Keep that out of here.
Yeah. And you have to, I think the idea of putting on a good face, putting on a good facade was much more important than vulnerability. And I think what happened is, somewhere along the line, maybe in the 60s, I don't know when it happened, or maybe it was the 12-step movement, because it happened in the 60s, really. That was part of all the change.
The love generation.
Yes. We realized that we could actually get sober, if we gave ourselves permission to be real and receive the embrace of community. And the magic of the 12 steps. I mean, every time I read the 12 steps, I think to myself, where did this miraculous system come from? It is just off the charts with wisdom and insight. And, I mean, in what world does powerless lead you to bliss, to
strength,
where, powerless leads to strength, powerlessness leads to strength. I mean, it's so counterintuitive, and yet that's where
all paradox.
That's where the magic happens, in the intuition and the paradox, it doesn't make any sense, and yet it makes every sense.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
it's amazing.
It's a tricky world, and you really have to. So someone said, recently I heard someone say that, oh gosh, I wish I could remember it. Something like holding things loosely, or not being dogmatic, or surety. If you let go of those things, that's when the
answers come.
That's right. That's where the healing and the answers and the loving repair and the wisdom. That's where those things start coming in.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think
That's
the
why
12
Richard Rohr says we come to it by getting much more by getting it wrong than by getting it right.
Yeah, and he wrote a book. I'm sure you've heard of it. He's going to be offering a course. He's going to be offering the course twice, I think once in January and once in March, from his book Breathing Underwater, which is an examination of the 12 steps with a Christian sort of leaning. Although Richard was a Jesuit, so it's not dying dogmatic, like you said. So Breathing Underwater is a very, very good book of a Jesuit priest examining the 12 steps and showing how they correlate to spiritual growth. And it really worth getting that book and maybe looking into the course.
Yeah, and I think with
So
Richard
I
Rohr,
just
if
mentioned it.
anybody who doesn't know him, if you have any agitation inside of you about your Catholic upbringing, Richard Rohr is going to
Yeah.
straighten that out. He's going to
Yeah.
he does not buy into the BS.
No, he does not. As
And
a
he
matter of
just
fact,
he's
yeah,
so he's so graceful and eloquent in how he dismisses the pretense and gets right down to the heart of the matter.
yeah, he's unafraid.
And so
He has, he has no fear. So with no fear, you can get a lot accomplished.
Yeah, and so if you have any debris from your Catholic upbringing but you still have some attachment to it, he's where you want to be. He's a really
Yeah,
good
I agree.
homing pigeon, to
Yes, he is. Absolutely. Great,
contact
great
with.
way to
Yeah.
say it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, anybody could Google Richard Rohr and Center for Action and Contemplation it's in New Mexico. Um so yeah, so I guess we've really talked here about the human trials and tribulations, the trials and tribulations of being a human being, and a culture that really tells you to put your humanness away, and I think that's what you and I talk about is like, no, we're bringing the skeletons out of the closet, and we're going to look at them because those skeletons have something to say. They really truly do. And I mean, I have some close friends like yourself, Chris, and we do talk about how generationally we're still reverberating from actually World War II. My dad, served in the military in World War II and came home with all that imprinted on him. And, we all suffered. Uh, and by the way, the apple off from the tree, my children suffered from my unhealed woundedness, and on and on and on and we go. And I think what our biggest hope is in our talks is to um, come clean, so to speak. We want to have our human experience, all of the joys and the sorrows.
And
So
we know that
yep.
we know that the things that we were brought up to think were shameful are
Mhm.
really in disguise for avenues of if we examine those things, we're very likely to come up with some real pearls of wisdom for ourselves. So it's
Absolutely.
always a good idea to think, in my upbringing, this is what really got me off center or misguided or it really didn't lead me anywhere productive. But maybe I can go back and look at it again in a different light.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, harkening back to the 12 steps, it's exactly what the 12 steps are designed to do. They're designed to open up that Pandora's box of beliefs that have no basis in truth. They're just, by truth, I mean what was really happening. It was suffering. There was suffering. And nobody wanted to be with that suffering. They wanted to just push it aside and say, let's just get busy and productive, and it'll all take care of itself. And there's an expression around AA where it's buried, but unfortunately, it's buried alive. If it's not healed, it's still reverberating. It will still rear its ugly head at the most inopportune time. By show its head, I mean, people get triggered because they have this old wound around nobody hears me, I'm not recognized, I've been abandoned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all somebody has to do is say something like, what's the matter with you? Well, what's the matter with me? You got time? You got a couple of years? I'm gonna lay it on you. I mean, that wouldn't be my response would be like, what do you mean? What's the matter with me? Because I'm not going to start. I don't even know that I'm being triggered. A simple statement like, what's the matter with you?
So that's interesting. You don't know that you're being triggered. And I think part of the triggering mechanism is that we don't receive we don't get triggered and become aware of it at the same time.
Right. Unless we've done the work. So I'm not gonna pound my chest at all, but I have done this a great deal of work with the steps. And so now if I'm working the program the way I'm supposed to work it, living in steps 10, 11, and 12 and growing, then I will be aware, that just tickled my my old not good enough, my not good enough button. So I'm either going to talk about this with this person, and they may or may not be able to hear me because they just were saying something glib. After all, they were only kidding around. I mean, why do you have to give me this big long story about what it means to you? Well, I got to, because that way I can continue to have a relationship with you that has meaning. Oh, I don't know if I want a relationship with meaning. Okay, well, then we know where we are. So, it's really interesting. A lot of people don't want that information. They don't want you to be that. They want you to just move on and get over it. I don't need all that. I just want superficiality. Well, then I know, this isn't a person I'm going to get that close to. I can be, cordial and so forth and so on, but perhaps we're not going to be able to be real with one another. And the chances are that pushback indicates something within them that needs healing. So it's all a big
wound and heal.
Wound and heal.
Wound and heal.
It's a battleground,
A battleground. Yeah.
Of the heart.
Yes.
Yeah. Gosh, I just got a great image just then of heart shapes with swords in their hands on a battlefield. Oh, because that's what we've got, don't we?
Yeah.
With legs and little arms with little swords.
Yeah. Yeah, I keep thinking about this little I guess you'd call it a skill that I picked up fairly recently, of whenever I hear something from someone that's troubling, or I often will say something like, did you intend to offend me? Because that comment was offensive. So first of all, there are a couple of things I want to do in that. I want to call them out. You can't throw stuff like that out without some kind of, you got to be responsible for what you throw out, right? In terms of comments to other people. And also maybe I interpreted, because I'm so focused on me, maybe I interpreted that comment that you made as something that's wrong with me. So is that what you meant? Because very often, the last couple of times I've done this, this one person said to me, it has nothing to do with you. It's all about me. So, and I'm like, whoa, so I got all bent out of shape about this comment. And then when I called them on it, they said, it's nothing to do with you. It's all about me.
Right.
So
Yeah. So that's
you
going
go
on
into
too.
this war of I get offended, I go off and pout. Um, there's a silent treatment. And meanwhile, it's all based on a fictitious
Right.
scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, that the Marshall Rosenberg nonviolent communication is really handy. I do it on occasion when I think to do it, but I'm not very practiced at that. Keeping it on the I statements I need and I feel. And could you tell me if you had any response to that? So you're not just giving some blanket statement I need and feel. You're also inviting the other person into what you said, what meaning that what you said has to them. And boy, it really helps, because there's nothing to hang your defensive hat on. The defensiveness, oh, what are you saying about me? I'm not saying anything about you. I'm actually saying something about me, and what I need, what I feel and need. And so there's nothing to push back on. It's quite remarkable that this fellow Rosenberg came up with this method. And then he further says it doesn't matter what the response is from the other party. What matters is you've expressed yourself. And that's like, wow,
Yeah, it's
that's right.
self-knowledge. So I just happen to have this inventory of needs that Marshall Rosenberg
yes, yeah,
put together.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
And
Yeah,
it's really quite
it's
astonishing
wonderful.
how much that helps in terms of, because the vocabulary that I need when I'm feeling hurt or wounded is just not there. It goes away,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Right.
So that helps me to retrieve um my experience of it. And if I bring my experience of it to the other person, and then they bring their experience of what's going on to me, there's a lot of, it redirects the
energy.
yeah, the energy and the routine. So if you have a marriage or parent, child, some kind of family member, there's
Yep.
there's a routine in your arguing.
Right. It's a pattern. It's a pattern.
And you
Yes.
always often fall into the same pattern over and over and over again.
Yep, for sure.
And usually it's kind of a dead end and there's not a lot of resolution. But this inventory of
Correct.
needs and all of his other stuff, if you can pull it out when you're feeling really wounded, you can often find the right word to express yourself, go to the other person with that and say, I felt fearful when you said that. And then maybe the other person didn't have any idea that they were sending out that kind of message.
That's right. That's
so
right.
It's really quite helpful.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason I think, Chris, that happens, that the other person doesn't realize it, is because we're often operating on a very superficial level. So we don't get that our words have such power. And so we're just throwing these words around, and they're not really connected with anything. They're not really connected with feelings and needs. They're just connected with, okay, well, I don't want to bother, or this is too heavy for me, and I don't have the I don't have the wherewithal to go any deeper than I'm going. Or practice. I don't have the practice to express myself in a way that's not going to be that's gonna be make sense or have meaning or any of those things.
Right. And if I'm a
Yeah,
man, maybe I'm telling myself, I really need to be in control.
right,
Maybe if you're a woman too, but I think that men get this message very clearly in our culture that they always have to be in control. And if they're not in control, you don't want to let anyone know that you're not in control.
right. And it's not the wheelhouse to allow themselves to be seen other than sort of this guy, this human that does stuff, gets stuff done. I get stuff done. I don't want to mess around with all that messy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that messy stuff is who we are, man.
Yeah, but maybe in the past that man, let's talk about men for now. That man has tried to
Sure.
navigate these very complex waters and has not been able to do it. And the
Absolutely.
idea of failing at something is definitely not acceptable. So um,
Yeah. Well,
men in our
if you
culture are
ask
not
all
allowed
the,
to fail.
yep, sorry for interrupting. If you ask any guy, most guys will say they were told when they were little boys not to cry. Little boys don't cry. I mean, that right there is like, wow. So what do I do with my sadness? Well, you never have any. Just keep busy.
Yeah.
It's just really. So then they pair up with us, and we were like crybabies, What
And
do I
we
do with this crybaby?
we get in their way because they have this little procedure that's that they've been able. I mean, the poor kid, he wasn't allowed to cry. What the heck is that all about? What the heck? I mean, it's
It
just
was
whenever I see
widespread.
movies that have that on it. Fortunately, I don't see that a lot in my personal life, but if I ever see that happening, I'm just like, I cannot understand at all. And
Yeah,
and yet
yeah,
it's so I used to think that the women's movement, I was a real feminist in the 60s and the 70s, and I still am, but I've come to believe that it's it's really um, it's really both sexes that need to examine the cultural mores that they were brought up with, because when you are told to
absolutely.
have no emotions as a little boy, and you are told that you are the only value you have in a relationship is being a provider. I mean, oh my goodness. Oh,
Right,
it's
right,
so
right.
damaging.
Yeah,
And
I
and it's
agree.
it's really cruel.
It is cruel. I'm hearkening back just for a moment to my childhood and my mom and dad's, exchanges. And, they would talk about, what had to be done. They're going to go shopping or this is needed, sort of the practicalities of life. I think they did okay with that. But when it came to expressing emotion, they were just clueless around that because they never saw anyone do it. So what they would do is they would save up all of their hurts from the week, the work week, and then they would go to the American Legion on Friday nights and get some brews in them, some brewskis, and then they'd come home and all of it would come out, and it would be insane. I mean, literally insane and quite abusive and the rest of it. And I think that scene that I'm expressing was very common. I think it was very common that women were hurt during the week by different things. Men were hurt by different things. And then they would get the lubricant, alcohol, and they would then let it fly. And it was so destructive. And it was so destructive to them, and it was destructive to the children that had to listen to it. I think I'm talking about a fairly common occurrence of people my age, and probably still now. I mean, I don't know, because I'm not a child in a home anymore. Now we have other aspects of things going on, and other drugs. So yeah, I mean, and so coming out of that history, and passing that history on, if not in the actual real life events of those things, although some of that went on in my life as well, even if it doesn't show itself in exactly the same way as Friday night coming home from the American Legion, post 360, House Neck, Massachusetts. I'll give it a bad name. No, I'm only kidding. It's a wonderful place. These things are still being played out because we don't have a language. We don't develop a language that allows us to speak about our feelings and needs. We don't. I mean,
it's a real ripoff.
It's a real ripoff. Yeah, it is.
I mean, what are you taking from someone when you tell them that they can't have their feelings? I mean, it's just, it's like ripping an organ out of their body. Except that, maybe you can get by without your appendix or something. I don't know. I just think every time I think about that, and I think that everyone in this culture is affected by that in some way. Some really go off the deep end. Some just like live in this low level, nobody really hears me. Nobody really understands me.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. And I have to be in control all the time and make sure that nothing bad happens. Right. And, that's a prescription for a father. What's that?
Addiction. A
Addiction.
prescription for addiction.
Right. And it also means that even if you don't get addicted, it means that you never really express your real self.
That's right.
You live in this sort of manufactured personality.
Yep. Yep.
And that's going to hit the fan someday. It's.
Yeah, and this isn't a psychology class, but this huge increase in narcissism is exactly what you're talking about. So there's a splitting off, there's a disassociation from the humanness one has and all these feelings to a persona. And that persona moves through life, showing itself as somebody who gets things done, good person, good guy, and underneath is this cauldron of bubbling, confused feelings that never get expressed. And it's quite a phenomenon. I mean, it's really happening in our culture more and more that people have personas as opposed to human being.
Mm. And where do you think
all of the messiness?
Where do you think God comes in with all this?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, God is the answer. What do I mean? I mean that the turning to show me the way, as someone we know once said, is sort of the first little door opening that there must be more than this. There must be more than this. I am getting so tired of performing so that I get the attaboys or attagirls that make me continue to perform. And then, for whatever reason, we call it grace. I think that's the word we use. The person, for whatever reason, surrenders to the greater whole, the idea that there's a divine intelligence or a universal intelligence that wants something better for us than performing.
So you
We're
mentioned
not
something, you mentioned something really, really critical, I think, thanks to our friend Alan, who gave us Show Me the Way. This is, I think maybe for both of us, it's a critical mantra in our spiritual journey. Would you say that?
Oh, for sure.
So somebody could come to Show Me the Way as a mantra without any religious background, um, any kind of religion. You could be Jewish, Muslim, Christian, nothing, Quaker, or whatever. But
Right.
you could use Show Me the Way, um, without never going to church or temple or any kind of religious ceremony. You could just out of the blue on Tuesday morning wake up and start saying Show Me the Way 3 times a day. And um there would have to be a shift, some kind of shift in um in the way you feel about yourself, in the way you behave in the world, um in the way your interior, your heart and soul life starts to change and blossom. It's slow in most people, I think, but this is an antidote for the disturbed, um, really cruel, um, a stereotype that the American culture has created. And
Yeah.
it's Show Me the Way. That's 4 words. Show me the way. Show me the way. Show me the way. Show me the way. Hmm.
Show me the way. Yeah. Yeah. So simple, yet so difficult.
Right. And like for me, when I like yesterday, I have these days when I get into negative thinking and I just kind of can't get out of it. I mean, I can't say that I try really hard either. Sometimes it has its grip on me, or I'm asleep. I'm walking but not conscious. Um
Right.
so yesterday was a pretty negative day for me, and I ended it with Show Me the Way, and it pulled me up. It pulled me up.
It's
Uh
great.
yeah,
Great.
yeah.
It's really great. It was a difficult time for me yesterday too. And I don't so there's theories about, the heaviness of things right now. I mean, of course, there's lots of things to be heavy about. Um, and at the same time, there's this other message that's coming through right now. The heaviness, it's always darkest before the dawn, kind of thing. So, there's something else that's going on, and being born, and it's we're in labor, and yeah, I think that I'm hearing this from a lot of different areas in my life, that we're in the gauntlet, to use one of your words. I think it's a great word of struggle, against, or a pushing back, a pushing out of a place that we've been held in. We've been held captive, since the beginning of this country, and I can't speak for any of the other countries, but we have collective grief in this country about how this country got on its feet, and what and who had to die, and who had and so on and so on, and that's still happening.
Right. That's a really good point. So maybe even if we're not conscious of it, everybody who's not indigenous, or everybody who's not Black or Jewish, has this guilt.
The word is white privilege.
Yeah, it's white privilege, right? Exactly. There's this, what would you say, shame,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um,
And unresolved grief, grief that's not ever been
yeah,
owned and, collectively by people such as
Yeah.
But we know it. We can't not know it. We do know it. And that isn't saying we should be put in the gallows, but it is saying that let's get real about that.
Yeah, because at the very least, anyone who lives in this country probably has or might have ancestors, or well, even if you don't have ancestors, if you live in this country, you have the knowledge of the fact that the people who founded the country, um, came over here, thought, this is really great. I'm going to move my whole family in here. And oh, there's some people living here now. Well, we'll just get rid of them.
Yeah.
We'll smoke them out.
Yeah.
And then if they react in an angry way, we'll call them savages.
Yeah.
And
when
so, yeah.
Savages, when the other, those were not the true savages. The true savages are the ones that wanted stuff and things and
and the occupiers.
Yes, the occupiers. So I guess this is a good time to say, show me the way, because it's a heavy, heavy subject that we've got going there. And maybe just simply being mindful of that could be a way to begin the process of
Can you say that again? Begin the process of what?
Oh yeah, I couldn't think of a good word, but it's a fine word. To begin the process of apology, to begin the process of owning that white privilege is not a pretty thing.
Yeah, I think it's good to air that out and to bring it out into the open, because these psychic experiences have their roots in our psyche, and so it's a good idea to give them some fresh air, even though it's painful to remember.
And light.
Yeah.
Show me the way.
Yeah, so a really good book is Waking Up White.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah.
I have not read it, but I've heard of it. They actually had a book on it.
Forget the name of the author, but it's about a woman waking up white. She grew up in a wealthy suburb in Massachusetts, and it wasn't until she was quite a bit older that she realized what was going on with the oppression that had enabled her to get where she was, and she had no awareness of it at all, because none of us do until we learn about it.
That's right. And then of course our history books are a little cockeyed, so
you think
just a little.
Yeah. I had this realization came to me, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so. I mean, in a really big way, that the history books aren't necessarily correct.
Right.
I mean, just because you learn something. What's that?
Oh, Christopher Columbus.
Yeah. Because just because you learn something in history class in 10th grade doesn't mean it's right.
We could almost say, Chris, that we were gaslighted all the way through school.
There's a little bit of truth to that, I think.
Oh my God.
But how much power those history books have?
Big time.
And they know it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if certain social powers that be have an influence there. I'm sure it could be true. Anyway,
oh, yeah.
I digress.
Yeah, well, I feel like today you showed me the way.
You always show me the way.
And something bigger than both of us is showing us the way.
That's right.
I want to believe that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for it.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. Big time.
Because every time I'm shown the way, it's just like a gift falls out of heaven. It could be a small thing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's a gift.
Totally. And you want to know the strange coincidence? Whenever I actually am sincere about saying, show me the way, because sometimes, truth be told, I might just throw it around a little bit. But when I'm sincere, when I ask to be shown the way, it's never the way I thought I should go.
No,
Ever.
no, no. That is such an important piece. The way we think it should.
Don't ask.
What's that?
No wonder we don't ask.
Yeah. Yeah, this is why I don't pray anymore with words. I feel like, okay, God knows what's going on, and uh, God is a lot more wise than I am. So I'm just going to hold so and so in my heart,
Yes.
and have the
Yeah.
faith God is going to do whatever is best.
And I just thought of something, and maybe millions of people have thought of this, but when we're in the dumps, we're really down in the dumps. The idea of holding somebody else in prayer in the way you're talking about, just simply holding them in prayer, not saying I think they should have this or this should happen. That I'll bet you if we could, when we're in our most down place of, well, this is terrible and whatever, if we at that moment could pray for somebody else in that open-hearted way, I'm just feeling like that might be the most potent way to do it, because often I will think of others when I'm in a good place as opposed to in a bad place. So perhaps that is, that's an opening where thinking of another and another's struggle with something while I'm in my own struggle and thinking, poor me, poor me. In the old days, it was pour me a drink. So I thought I'd throw that in there. That would be a really potent time to make that offering. I bet you to get me out of my SHIT.
I love it, and I do think it's an antidote, isn't it?
Antidote, exactly. So that's the message for this Holy Compost. The antidote for being miserable is to think of somebody else and hold them in grace.
Hold them in grace. I love it. I like that much better than holding them in prayer, because whereas I don't believe that prayer is always verbal, I feel like my prayer is almost never verbal,
Right,
intentionally. But
yep.
holding somebody in grace, you don't even have to worry about the prayer, the verbal, no verbal. It just hold them in grace. Grace is the most beautiful word.
And so we're going to hold anyone that gets to watch this at least all the way to the end, if they can bear up under it. We're going to hold you in grace.
Amen. Hold the world in grace. Every beautiful person, and that means every person.
Yes.
Every person we're going to hold in grace.
Into the cosmos. Let's do it big, Chris. All the way out to the cosmos.
No holds barred.
All right. Till the next time.
Till the next Holy Compost.
Yes.
Have a blessed holiday.
You as well, Chris. Thank
Okay,
you.
my dear.
All right. Bye now.
Bye. Bye-bye.